Hey, deserving listeners, I thought I'd go back and rewatch the season knowing what we know now. Let's get to it and see what comes out of my face.
I went through a whole mental, breakdown a second ago.
With Brennan and with Cole, they have said they don't see anything serious with me in the long run.
I will say there was a little exchange between Colleen and Raven, and at least the way it was edited, but it kind of looked this way, where Colleen is informing Raven that she had a breakdown and that she feels rejected, and Raven just kind of is like, oh really? And just walks off. In alignment with when Raven's doing literal jumping jacks when Bartise is talking about his deepest insecurities and fears and difficulties, or at least one of his deep issues, sad issues. And, it'd be one thing if Raven were stretching, but jumping jacks, it's not super easy to pay attention to anyone if you're doing jumping jacks, right? And it's observable from the other side, right? Like when you're doing jumping jacks, he can hear her doing jumping. But yeah, I don't know about Raven. Seems like a perfectly nice person, but it's these little things you don't pick up the first time watching the season.
He ended things. I went through a whole mental, breakdown a second ago.
With Brennan and with...
Yeah, I don't think that was edited. Now, maybe Raven was saying something. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to go do something else. But she just said, yeah, I just had a mental breakdown because blah, blah, blah. And Raven's like, oh, okay. I don't know if I'm just reading into it.
To be the only ones on the dance floor because he wants to sing us a special song. And my dad was with us. I'm like, okay, what the fuck's going on here? What is this? Essentially, the whole group of us has put it together that this is the man that my mom was engaged to. My dad, when he found out, threw a fucking fit.
Yeah, so I will say, upon re-watching this scene, that Bartise's story isn't the most gripping of stories. I think Raven has said that in the pods she would get tired, so she'd have to keep moving to stay awake, which I could totally understand. Again, I would recommend that if that were needed, she wouldn't do the most actively loud exercise when he's going to something that's really obviously vulnerable for him and difficult for him. The other thing to think about is that even though when I'm watching this and I'm hearing Bartise's story, it doesn't sound incredibly vulnerable, but for him, I think it is. You can sort of hear it in his voice. And do I think this is a high crime that Raven is doing? No, but it sort of indicates something. And I think I talked about this at the time, but just very briefly, there are a lot of signs that I'm seeing rewatching, and I remember seeing back then, but I'm not really reacting to, is that in terms of, videoing it, is that, who knows, but she seems to potentially have what we call avoidant attachment, where individuals are emotionally neglected consistently, to some extent, maybe not tremendously, enough that the child learns that they can't really depend on others to meet their needs, their emotional needs. And so they kind of give up on other people. They also try to suppress their emotions. They try to, this is a subconscious thing. And this is developed when you're 12 months old, 18 months old. And so the individual downplays their emotions. They're having emotions, but they don't tend to notice them because it doesn't help them to notice them. And they also don't tend to notice other people's emotions because that's what's being modeled to them. And also, if they're not going to pay attention to their own emotions, then why would they pay attention to other people's? Again, these aren't choices that these people make. Largely avoidant attached individuals are completely unaware of themselves. They tend to frame themselves as, yeah, I'm fine. My childhood was fine. Everything was fine. People who are preoccupied attachment and disorganized attachment, more often than not, they will tell you, no, my childhood was awful. There were a lot of horrible things about my childhood. Because it's just much more conscious. I mean, that's the preoccupied, anxious attachment style is typified by being preoccupied. You're thinking about the fact that people aren't there for you. Avoidant people avoid the whole thing. It's not conscious to them. And so when other people are having vulnerable moments, avoidant attached individuals, they don't even notice. They're not being a jerk face. So if that's the case with Raven, I don't know, obviously, but if it is, well, honestly, I would hope that that is what it is. Not for her sake, but because if she's not avoidantly attached and she is in touch with her emotions and other people's needs, then she's willingly or willfully trying to not pay attention or something. So for people who are avoidantly attached, they just don't even notice. They don't notice other people having needs. They don't even think of emotions being that way. They don't think about people that taking care of each other. They just think, well, we're all on our own. Not like cynical. They can be cynical, but regardless of that, they orient their lives in a very independent manner, and they just figure, well, I've got my shit together. And certainly you do too, and so that's that. I don't know if that's what's happening here, of course, but it is pretty pronounced.
That this is the man that my mom was engaged to. My dad, when he found out, threw a fucking fit. And so that was the beginning of the end for my parents' relationship. And this is crazy that I felt comfortable enough saying that. Like, I would never have thought in a million years I'm gonna share that fucking story. I can't believe I just did.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's worse than I remember. Because I thought, well, maybe she doesn't know that he's going deep, and maybe he did this a lot. Maybe he yammered a lot about a lot of different things. But then he literally says, I've never been this deep, or I've never told anyone that, or I very rarely say this. And then in a very disconnected manner, she just says, oh, that's good. And then she continues to do more jumping jacks, which again, are loud. If she were stretching, he wouldn't hear it, right? And because she could argue, look, I was paying attention, I was doing jump jacks, but I think anyone would know that at least it doesn't seem like you're paying attention. But even her reaction, oh, good,
And this is crazy that I felt comfortable enough saying that. Like, I would never have thought in a million years I'm gonna share that fucking story. I can't believe I just did.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's not even bad, but I see that was hard for you, so
Yeah.
thank you.
oh, it's even worse than I remember too. It's not even that bad. I mean, because it wasn't. I think she's trying to be nice in her way. She's like, it's not shameful. It's not a shameful story. It's it's an interesting story. And she is like, yeah. I'm pretty sure she's mortified by it. I'm pretty sure about that. So it's not like she stands behind this, but I don't know. This is one of those scenes that is memorable. It's worse than I remember it being.
Share that fucking story. I can't believe I just did.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's not even bad, but I see that was hard for you.
Right, and I could see how that's hard for you. Oh, man. If someone said that to me, I'd be like, well, I'm never saying anything vulnerable for the rest. I don't even know if I want to be friends. I mean, honestly, if someone did that to me, I wouldn't judge them. I'd just be like, oh, they're not the sort of person that I want to be friends with. Like, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's me. Maybe I yammer too much or something, but to have that reaction of like, oh, that's so cute of you. I'm reading into it. I'm exaggerating, but oh, it's so cute of you that you think that that's vulnerable. Like, it's not even that big of a deal. Good for you. Like, it kind of has that. I don't know if I'm just overreacting. I probably am. What do you think?
So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. While you do your jumping jacks.
You can hear it?
No, yeah.
Oh, damn. Why
I heard
is
it during that story, that monologue I was telling. I was like, oh my God. Bartise gets as deep as he's ever gotten in his life, and the person that's listening to him is doing a fucking workout.
No. That's funny.
And then continues and then says, that's funny. Now, I think at this point, she's into him, right? Like, he's on her list, I think. And, it's way worse than I remember it being. Oh, man. I mean, there's so many points there where you would think Raven would be like, oh, I'm sorry. I think anyone would do that, right? They'd be like, oh, even if in their head they're like, well, it's not a big deal, or I can still hear you what I'm doing. Or you think she would say something like that. So, yeah, rough.
Thank you.
Yeah. While you do your jumping jacks.
You can hear it?
No, yeah.
Oh, damn. Why?
Okay, so clearly, she's like, oh, damn. So clearly she knows that it would be hurtful to do so, or at least impolite. So you would think in this moment, then she would finally stop. But she doesn't.
I heard it during that story, that monologue I was telling. I was like, oh my God. Bartise gets as deep as he's ever gotten in his life, and the person that's listening to him is doing a fucking workout.
No, that's
And they didn't go into it enough in the reunion. She barely talked about it. She seemed to be indicating that she was mortified. So I can't imagine her not being mortified. And maybe she would say, look, these were long days. And I was starting to lose it. I mean, the amount of conversations that we were having and the alcohol and the lack of being able to work out, like my brain wasn't working right. And when I see that, yeah, it's awful. But I just have to tell you, like my brain wasn't, I was glitching. You know, I could see something like that, hopefully.
Trying to find love, and I'm sharing all this stuff, and I'm becoming vulnerable, and you're just working out. What if my gut's telling me the wrong girl? Me realizing, me being in the pod on a date with you and just like having a burning desire to be with like another girl.
Okay, so this is the breakup. I don't even really remember this scene, but he is now telling Raven that he wants to be with Nancy. So this is how this goes down. And I think at the time, I did not detect that Raven cared much. But I think subsequently, it was perhaps the real situation that Raven did care more than she let on. I don't know, let's watch.
Right? So
yeah.
I'll say it with fucking Nancy.
Yeah.
So it's so fucking hard. I have like,
I mean, not that Raven was pining after Bartise. I think past this point, she didn't have really any romantic thoughts about Bartise at all. She wasn't like longing for him. But what I mean is that I think people were commenting that they thought that in my videos that they thought Raven was more hurt by this and was more, had Bartise definitely in the #1 spot.
You really want to be with Nancy, like
right, but I'm trying to like explain it to you because I have a fucking heart. Like I don't go out there looking for girls just to like hang out for a night. I go out there looking for girls that make me feel better.
Like, that is so amazing you just said that. I also made the same decision as you. Yeah, it's a no for me.
Yeah, that's what I remember, because there was a previous scene that I didn't show in which she seemed to be really bonding with SK. So yeah, it is how I remember it being.
And my other date is just like very emotionally reassuring, you know?
Yeah.
We like connect on a deeper level. And maybe this is like a revelation for me, but I, on the inside, feel guilty because I feel like guys always love me more than I love them. Or like...
Yeah, I remember her saying that. That's a real classic thing that avoidantly attached people will say. I don't know if that's the case with her, but a very common thing that avoidantly attached people will say is something along these lines that, well, they'll frame it differently. Often they'll frame it like, people are too needy, or people like depend on people too much, and they don't, you know, because they're oriented towards pathological independence themselves, and they're just like, because they will be attacked, they'll be criticized for being an enigma or being distant or being hurtful or neglectful or something. And when you get all those kinds of criticisms and you have no self-awareness, you're just like, well, there's something wrong with you, not me, when there's perhaps something wrong with both people. Not wrong, but, you know, traumatized and distorted, unhealthy. And so you'll hear people say, I'm often the one rejecting other people. In fact, the more avoidantly attached you are, the more likely that you might not have ever been broken up with, that you were always the one to break up, because as soon as things get a little wonky, the avoidant person will convince themselves that it's supposed to be over, and they will run. They'll be, just it's better to be on my own. Let's just end this now. And so they will often think of themselves as not caring as much as other people care. So I don't know. It's just a kind of I don't know about her, but that's a classic thing that you hear. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.